All right, shalom, everyone. Slight apologies on going long. I didn't anticipate the introduction to be this long, but yeah, you guys have got to heard a little bit of Ruth and I's test, and remember the story because there's a whole other dimension that we're going to dive into next week regarding brotherhood. Because this story, especially leaving the congregation, actually there's a whole aspect that involves the donkey. But we'll get into that more next week. But, the witness and the testimony you heard today could have looked a lot different had we not put the fear of Elohim first. Praise the Father. Ruth and I understand that Yah does come first. And, praise be to the Father for my bride that she understands the power that she wields. Because if the fear of Elohim had not been in play at either, let's say at Ruth's level, my testimony could have sounded a lot different. If the fear of Elohim had not been in play in my life, again, the testimony could have looked a lot different. Would we have learned the same lessons? Arguably, but the way to get there would have looked a lot different. Curtis and I were speaking, and we're going to face these trials all the time. And we may learn the lessons one way or another, but how we go about it, you can learn the lesson with a lot less heartache, or you can learn the lesson with a lot more heartache, And so, hopefully people are understanding at least what it looked like practically just in Ruth and I's little version. Like I said, it's not exhaustive by no means, but hopefully it gives tangible, practical application of how we navigated certain things and why we made the decisions we did. Is because at the very forefront of our mind is we're serving, and it's His will, it's His desire. Question is, are we as a married couple going to go on that journey together? What say you, Curtis? We can't hear you, mate, for whatever reason. Still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Oh. Settings all mucked around. Yeah, the test, a witness of the test. Without the fear of Elohim, then we won't seek the discipleship we need, and sovereignty stays on the throne. And sovereignty, our personal sovereignty in the fallen state, is subject to thoughts and emotions. And if we are making decisions based on our thoughts and emotions and not the fear of Elohim, and discipleship, and that's discipleship from those in our lives as well as the Ruach, of course, more importantly, but to have that input into fallen thoughts and emotions, we'll make decisions based on our thoughts and emotions. And when we make decisions, major decisions, there could be no major more than who you choose as a spouse. If we're doing it on thoughts and emotions, our sovereignty, we're making these big decisions based on our personal fallen sovereignty and not on the foundation of the fear of Elohim, nor the discipleship in it. And it's very difficult when you're choosing a spouse not to have your thoughts and emotions rule you. and they take over, and we won't hear what we need to hear, or make the hard decisions in order that the good fruit can come from it. So it's it was interesting listening to the testimonies today, because of course I've got my my journey actually in a lot of what you mentioned today.
Yeah.
In all of that. So it was kind of interesting just to hear it from yourself and Ruth. And so I was remembering, going back and remembering that, and watching the decisions that you were making and Ruth were making.
And this is the aspect that we'll cover next week, community, that Curtis was actually there the whole time behind the scenes. And so there's an aspect of the fear of Elohim in brotherhood, because Curtis was watching me go through this, and he's watching for certain things. Is this a man that fears Yah? And on my direction, is this a man of Elohim? Should I listen to him? And we'll get into that more next week. But it's today, maybe I should have mentioned this more, but I will definitely mention it next week. The discipleship played a huge, huge aspect in all of this. People may be listening going, wow, you guys made the right decisions. How wonderful. Yes, it is wonderful. It wasn't easy, but I had some real
they were still yours to make.
Yeah. But what made it easier was the discipleship I was having behind the scenes. And we'll get into this next week, because praise the Father, he sent me a donkey that had been before me in all of this. But it didn't make any of the choices easier. It in the sense of the flesh, did it give me resolve to make the choice?
In fact, it could have made it. In fact, I would argue it made it harder. But you and Ruth did have a fear of Elohim, and it's that simple. Your witness could have looked a lot different. It's that simple. But yeah, I would argue that no, I don't think it made it easier in the sense of choices and actions. I would argue it bore way better fruit, but I don't think it made it easier. I think you and Ruth had to have a faith where the fear of Elohim was there before you'd listen to anyone. I know when people aren't listening to discipleship, often, especially in difficult things and thoughts and emotions, and us being in this fallen state is, it's gripping us. It grips our very nefesh, and the spirit man and the flesh man, which Paul talked about. They'll be at war with each other. And if we listen to the flesh man with the sovereignty that we face, not our spirit man as such, we can make things a lot more difficult for each other. Like I say, Michael, we can be the children that, hear the discipleship of our parents and don't touch the stove, or we can be the children that touch the stove and we get burnt. Either way, the person to touch the stove will sit with that child. And whether they have the fear of their parents or not, to know that there's a love and a wisdom there for them, they'll find out one way or the other. They'll either watch their sibling burn themselves, or they'll watch themselves burn themselves, or whatever. But they're going to find out the mom and dad weren't lying, one way or another, and then they'll have a witness, a testimony. One has a scar and one doesn't. But it's one of these things where our witness will be a good or a bad one, because we're a witness, no matter what. And we're a witness of being recalcitrant in this process, or we're a witness of not being. And many of us pay a great price for making decisions based on our sovereignty through thoughts and emotions in a fallen state. And although the Father's with us and he doesn't leave us and he walks through us making all of these things, a lot of us have a lot of testimony that is based on the principles you raised today, Michael, you and Ruth raised. because we bring a lot into the party that make up our testimonies. That wasn't Yah inflicting us with things. It was actually us sitting on the throne, and then him being the master, of course, at working with our bad decisions. And what does wisdom look like? And so these are things that, everybody here is going to have a testimony, a witness of that. And I'm sure there's many people listening today going, I wouldn't mind doing that over again, or maybe shouldn't have done that, and all that sort of thing. But he's a master at working with his children, and he's done it for me. He's done it for Michael and Ruth and Pip, and he's done it for all of you. But we can make life. We can make our, add to our testimony in ways that the Father's allowing, but not necessarily imposing. And then he's the master at working with that. And so often, I remember listening to a brother one time telling me about their testimony, and he was accrediting even his bad decisions to Yah. And I'm going, whoa. The fact he allowed that doesn't mean it was him. That was you. The fact that he was a master at actually getting you out of that eventually and into a better place is glory to him. So our sovereignty is at play with everything you shared today with you and Ruth. And that's one thing that's very important for us to remember this, And our sovereignty either has a reverence of Elohim or it doesn't. If it has a reverence, we're going to make better choices. It's just that simple. There's no way around it. And if there's a reverence, we're going to be better husbands and we're going to be better wives. It's only our lack of reverence for Elohim that turns us into this, because reverence for him can overcome anything that has impaired us up until that point. Any EAD we've picked up, any bad witness we've had from our own upbringings, families, situations, wrongdoings to us, where we've, and we'll speak about this more, I guess, next week. But what we don't really understand is the fear of Elohim actually it's like a reset button. And despite what had happened to me in my life, it smacks you in the face and it goes, no, I will move forward in a different place, despite what's happened to me, or despite what I did to me, and then they created what happened to me, or despite the fact I was truly wronged, or despite the fact, whatever our backgrounds are. And then what happens is you don't develop a victim mentality. We're seeing a whole world running its decisions on thoughts and emotions now, and the victim mentality now is just exploding. It's as a result, absolutely exploding. Woe is me, but it's got nothing to do with holiness and set apartness. It's got everything to do with we still won't get off the throne of our lives. It's still my wife's problem, or it's still my husband's problem, or it's still the boss's problem, or it's still this, and it's like, it's everybody else. But, looking at ourselves. But if we can do it, if we can get the fear of Elohim and get counsel in our lives and do it, we can avoid a lot of poor witness. And some of us here gathered will only need to go as far as your own life to know that. But we have a Father that doesn't condemn us for it. And he's not sitting there going, I told you so. If that was the case, all I'd be hearing, Michael, from Elohim is, I told you so. But that being said, we can actually live in a space where we get his favor, his grace. And that's what grace really means, by the way. We often mistake mercy and grace, Mm-hmm. It's like, no. We're under his mercy, believe me. It's whether we get his grace in our lives, which is his favor. And he will bless the decisions that come with the reverence of Elohim and the wisdom and discipleship of good input into our lives. He will add favor into that because it doesn't disagree with how he does things. The reason why we don't get a lot of favor in our lives in certain things, and I often know if I'm not getting favor in a situation, I question, well, who's making, am I even getting input on this because the decisions are flopping? And these are real indicators. We have a Father who wants to give us favor, just like any good parents here in the community. You want to give your children favor. That's your desire to. You don't have a desire to torment your children. That's not the desire of loving parents. And we have a good Elohim. We have a good Messiah. We have a good King, a good bridegroom. He wants to give us favor. But we often ask for favor when it would hurt us, because he would actually confirm our wrong decisions. And then we would think, if we got favor in a lot of our wrong decisions, we would think that we were being pleasing. And that would actually be a bad parent. It would be the opposite. You want to give favor, where favor doesn't cause you to stumble. Mm. And I see parents, they give favor to their children and they're not doing them any good. That child needs consequence right now. And it's not getting it. In fact, it's getting favor based on its own demands. And we hurt the children. Well, the same thing happens spiritually in testimonies like today. It's the exact same things. I can tell you there's a lot of good witness that came out of Michael and Ruth's journey, but I can also tell you that the fear of Elohim and input into their life was a huge part of all of that process. So it ends up being a very good witness. Because they experienced the favor of Elohim as a result. Doesn't mean there wasn't the challenges, doesn't mean it wasn't tough, doesn't mean the thoughts and emotions weren't there. In fact, they were. I think it's a harder choice to actually choose Elohim and actually have to win the battleground of the mind over your own thoughts. Mm. To actually choose Elohim when everything in you is, feeling different. Feelings are powerful things. And we're to experience them in the fallen state, our thoughts in the fallen states. But we can operate in a way where they don't rule us. And that's the spirit, man, And so a lot of the testimony today, guys, I have a different line of sight than many people listening to it today. But I can assure you, they had to not choose feelings many times along the way and thoughts. It might sound all nice today when we're doing the teaching and applying these principles, but
yeah,
there was real sacrifice.
Curtis saw and heard a lot of feelings, believe me.
And heard a lot of thoughts, and so, like I say, and their sovereignty was in play the whole way, and so it was a good witness we heard today, but that doesn't mean it was easy. There was a lot of difficult choices they both had to make that were fighting feelings and thoughts. And that's their sovereignty at play. That's the one thing I would have added to the test. You can't, because it sounds like you're patting yourselves on the back, but I can. I saw when you were making those decisions that weren't based on your thoughts and emotions, that they were actually based on something bigger. And that is actually not an easy place to do. So, but if we can, then his favor can apply. We have a good Elohim. And I think he wants to dish out favor as much as he possibly can. I've said to you, Michael, I said Elohim's doing everything he can to, give me as much favor and reward as possible, and I do everything I can to diminish it. It's just it's that fight, that with ourselves. And I'd love to blame the pointy horn red pajama guy, but I've learned that doesn't get me anywhere.
Yeah. Well, I see that Shane has his hand up. So, did I press the wrong button? Shane, sorry, I may have accidentally put your hand down instead of asking you to unmute. Stick your hand back up. There we go. I'll press the correct button this time.
All right. Can you hear me?
Crystal.
All right. Shabbat shalom to you and the assembly, and you too, Curtis.
Hey, Shane.
Wow.
Shabbat shalom.
I'm trying to collect my thoughts a little bit because some of the things that you were saying, Curtis, got me just a lot more to chew on there about the reinforcement of behavior with children and favor, and kind of goes into the question that I was going to ask that I've had time enough to chew on. But I thought I would, since there's no other hands up, I thought I would, for the benefit of the assembly, and maybe get some more of your guys' wisdom on it. The single, I'll be honest, when the teaching started today, I thought, well, I'm single. I'm a single parent, and reverence. And I'll be honest, if it sounds ignorant, I don't care. But like reverence for my wife. Okay, I don't have a wife. I'm single. Do I have reverence for my children? I'm like, duh. And it's, you guys have all answered it. And it's just beautiful, the reverence to reflect and see, have I shown reverence in my choices? And it reminded me, the old saying, that we are the sum total of all our choices, and hearing you again, Curtis, talk about, making better choices. And so I kind of chewed on it and seen it a little bit, but if there's, maybe you guys can confirm or add more to, is it the journey itself, and reflecting and seeing there's a litmus test just to look and see if we've made or are making, putting Yah number one on a list of one and having that reverence grow. And, I kind of see the reverence, even though it's different, but it has similarities with trust and how that grows and is learned. And before I hand it over to you guys, first I just want to thank Michael for sharing, and him and his bride sharing the testimony. It's just beautiful, and it was so helpful, and I'm sure with the assembly too. Just so many things in how we went about choosing a bride, and just a quick snippet of my testimony before I came into discipleship. I was doing that as well, looking, having some thoughts, how he was candid with his heart, and like, should I stay and, change the assembly and help fix? And that's what I was doing before I found you guys and then got into discipleship years ago. As I was looking for a bride and thinking, imperfectly, I was trying to seek the feast and this and that. I thought I would bring this calling. I didn't even know what was going on at the time, but into, to find a bride. And while in discipleship, I'm perfectly content on being single now. And but to get back to what Michael shared, that's where I have come, and it's taken discipleship and walking it out with brothers to arrive to this place in my heart. But I would much rather be single till the end of this flesh journey than be unequally yoked or think that I could fix somebody. But I just wanted to hear anything you guys want to share, because what you guys were just sharing is just so beautiful on the choices, and be able to reflect on that and see the reverence, and so. But as far as the single, is would you say that would be a good reflection for me to see if I'm making good choices for the Father, that I'm making in my house for them, like you would in your marriage?
The principles of like fearing Elohim is fearing Elohim is fearing Elohim. It's what sphere you're making. So as I outlined at the start, there's the fear of Elohim in marriage, how it plays out in brotherhood, how it plays out in servant leadership, and ultimately how it plays out in Rome as a believer. but at the core is the fear of Elohim. This is why I really encouraged everyone, go watch the fear of Elohim first before you even hear the testimony of it, right? Because as it is an overarching principle that should govern all decisions. The only difference is within what sphere or what context you're making that decision. But the principle is the same. Do you fear Elohim in that choice? And so, arguably, if you're single, you've got one less sphere to worry about as how it pertains to your physical existence. Right? People never think that. People think that marriage will be wonderful and make life easier. Yeah, it is wonderful when it's right. Don't get me wrong. But it is another thing not to worry about, but it's another thing to contend with. As Paul would say, he makes the comment, I wish that some of you were as I am, the reference to being single, because he says those who are married have another set of things to contend with. And so you've now got another sphere to worry about the fear of Elohim. But whether you're doing it in the marriage, in brotherhood, it doesn't matter the context. The question still remains, are you fearing him? And putting him first, if you can put him first in one aspect of your life, you can put him first in another aspect. Within the marriage terms, it's just a lot easier if your spouse is putting Elohim first too. Because if not, you've got a whole other set of dynamics that then manifest themselves, and you'd mentioned unequally yoked, Now, I don't have a testimony of being unequally yoked, but the dynamics would essentially be the same, but it's how they play out, And so as we get through the series, we'll see that the principles are the same, but how they play out within their different contexts may look different, but the undercurrents are exactly the same. And, as a second point, you mentioned about, making decisions and stuff. I made this little quote, at the beginning. It's, you'll be presented with choices and decisions. It's in making them that you'll find out whether you fear Yah or not. I'd put a second point in there. Some decisions require trust and submission. Just because I know to fear Elohim doesn't make the choice any easier in terms of emotions, in terms of the wrestle of spirit versus flesh. Curtis was saying that arguably it's even harder when you know what you ought to do, but you got something kicking off in your head, your emotions, your decisions, and, but what I will say is that the more trust grows, it's not easier to make the choice in terms of the emotions that are associated with it, but the resolve to make the right choice grows, if that makes sense. Like Ruth and I, when the decision came, do we move to Canada or not, right? It was difficult, but our resolve in making that choice may have been greater because of our witness leading up to that point. There'd been this relationship with Elohim where we had actually learned to trust him. And as he'd learned to trust us, he would ask bigger decisions of us. And so for example, moving to Canada, the decision was just as difficult as any difficult decision, but I think our resolve to make the right choice, it's this thing you're almost resigned. You go, Father, this hurts. This is difficult, but we've seen and known enough to know that if we choose you in the long run, we will get, favor will come, and it has. And so I guess that's what I wanted to say regarding making decisions. They don't get easier in terms of the wrestle, flesh versus spirit, but maybe the resolve to make the right one gets easier. But then we all have wobblies every now and then. You can go through a long period of time making really good decisions, and then for some reason you have a wobbly. your battleground of the mind gets the best of you, this is when then discipleship and brotherhood really comes into play. I don't know if that makes any sense, Shane. I don't know what you want to add to that, Curtis.
Well, I'll just put a caveat in play here. At any time in our journey, our sovereignty just grabs a situation and makes a decision. And I think it's way easier to make decisions when you're in ignorance to, Elohim's position on something. You're just making decisions thinking how wonderful you are. And just going about life, you're doing your thing. Well, that can happen to any of us. And so we do that. When the challenge comes, or that test, and then what will ultimately be the witness of that test is when we know actually that this one's maybe not going to benefit the flesh or my emotions or all these sorts of things. And so suddenly now we're facing it, and this is that aspect, and we'll go through this our whole journey. It just looks a little bit different for me to be in that same space now, Shane. If you look at the Apostle Paul, and in fact, arguably, I would say 100%. But let's just drop it down just a little bit. Paul was most certainly married at one point. There's no way he was in the position he was in the Sanhedrin, if you understand the culture and what was going on at the time and everything else. What price did he pay? It may have been his marriage to hear the ultimate mystery, the great mystery. He paid a great price, on all sorts of fronts, in fellowship. And he probably did not pay a price on every front imaginable. And of course, he was able to be used as a great witness as a result. But whether you think, that's the case or not, what doesn't change, and what Michael was alluding to, is yes, if I look back 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years ago in my life, what would get me to the point of not knowing that I'm living in ignorance of my decision, or that I'm facing something that Yah's put before me, I need to make the right choice. It's way easier on things that used to be a struggle. The more we mature, it's just like in our physical life, right? It's way easier to say no to the second bowl of ice cream than it is when you're 10, right? Or when you're, maybe not for Michael. Michael loves his ice cream. but whatever it is for us, we grow and we mature in that. So when you become an adult, it's like, no, I'd enjoy that, but there's no way I'm going to make myself sick eating the whole bag of, whatever it is these days. Although sometimes men can be a little bit stupid still eat the whole bag. But the point being is, you're aware you shouldn't eat the whole bag, and it's a lot easier not to eat the whole bag of whatever bag it is that you want to be bagged by. But the whole process of maturity happens spiritually. And so what was once a challenge to me is not anymore. That reverence then, bred good witness, bred the understanding of that, which then locks in a set of wisdom that then is applied, right? So it's not hard for me to make the choices that I know are for Elohim in the same sort of areas that they once were much more difficult 20 years ago. However, those versions still exist for me today. It's just, it takes a lot more and a lot different circumstance to challenge it, to test it, to do those sorts of things. And so, and it's much the same way for, in the physical shadow picture. What tests an adult versus what tests a child physically in the fallen time domain are very different things, or at least should be. Maybe that's changing these days, unfortunately. But it should be. It's the same way spiritually. And this is why we want to grow to the stature and the fullness of Messiah, so that our decisions are much more in line with him, a lot quicker and a lot more wiser, right? And it bears better fruit as a result. But that still doesn't mean that, Michael and I and Pip and Ruth and, any of you still don't face challenges and face those things. It's just what it can take to face those things, might be just at a different scale and different level, but he's, it's still there. I faced some things just this past month, where it's like, okay, it's like, I know what I want to do, and then I know what I should be doing. And you chew it over. Hopefully you make better decisions with that fear of Elohim and discipleship and the line of sight of my bride and all these sorts of things. I have a lot more help to make a better decision these days when I am facing it. I've got my life experience, my maturity, everything else spiritually, right? So when I face it, even though it's much greater in scale, I've got a lot more input from the Ruach, a lot more input from the Word, a lot more input from my life experience, a lot more input from my discipleship, a lot more input from my wife, from my bride. All of those things are contributing to better decisions. If we don't allow this journey in our life, we won't mature. And if we don't mature, we could make the same mistakes we made 20 years ago. We're still making them now. And so we want to get past that. So I would say that growing spiritually and maturing spiritually changes these things and how we deal with them, and can make it easier and wiser, quicker, better input, all those sorts of things. But I'd also say that Elohim has a way of reminding us we're still fallen and that our sovereignty is still in play, and can bring things into our lives that still test us. And so, we're not, Michael's testimony today with the whatnot and this Q&A and whatnot, we're not saying, hey, we've made it, we're wonderful. We get challenged and we have to talk things through, or we have our bad days, or emotions get the better of us, or thoughts. And it's like, okay, but do they rule the way they once used to? No. It is different. But you certainly, the challenges are there, and no one's perfect. But he wants us to move on, not get paralyzed in perhaps past choices in our lives, or things we know we should have done better. I wish I'd known this, or whatever it is. He wants us to move on, not to turn into the pillar of salt. And, he wants us to grow and to develop. And despite the decisions that we may have made, which didn't bear good fruit, despite what we had faced, all those sorts of things, the fear of Elohim in its right place will grow and mature us. It will help us overcome, and we will move forward. And that's why the importance of this series. And we're just trying to land the helicopter now with Michael's series here, to sort of say, okay, well, how does this practically look, and so this is what today's been about. Hope that makes sense, Shane.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you so much. And yeah, like you were saying, a wobbly, I know what you're saying. And thank you for the word resolve, because I was trying to bring that into my stable meeting the other night. Because I hate to use the word easier, because the journey doesn't it's just like, oh, it's all fluffy now after years of discipleship. It's not easier, but resolve. That's a great word, that I have the resolve, and that the reverence has grown. It's beautiful to see. And like Curtis was saying, having all the avenues of his pattern and discipleship and the people you're surrounding with, the outcome is, better choices. And if you're sticking to all that. So thank you so much.
We have a lot more help these days.
Yeah, exactly.
I do never too. Walk alone.
my life is awesome now because of him, because of the Father, and the glory is him, because my house was so out of order years ago that the outcome of pursuing the kingdom and, going through discipleship is, I don't have the worry and the anxiety that I once had years ago, And so that's similar to having the body around and the people in my life and the things that I've gone through. So I just want to praise the Father, the things that I've gone through and walked through with brothers and with people, but that goes hand in hand with walking it out, So.
And the Father may choose to bring in a bride into your life and gain that line of sight and whatnot, but I guarantee you'll do it with a lot more wisdom. all Paul was, you will, all that was happening with the Apostle Paul is I think he had an eternal life wish, which is one. Wouldn't be fair to bring a bride in with that in the picture. And I'm not saying a death wish, I'm saying an eternal life wish, because to Paul, that's what, and so he was willing to die for his faith. Well, is this the right time to bring a bride back in? I'm understanding the message. I'm getting the purpose of this. I think all he's saying is that I'm in a place many aren't for various reasons. Eternal life wish. I'm getting the reason for the whole shadow picture. I've lived the mistakes of it. I've gone through what Elohim has with his people, lost his bride, but he can do something I can't. He's got all of these things. And I think he's speaking from his position. He's not saying, well, you're best not to have a bride. He's just saying where he ended up, he's probably knowing I don't have much time left. And I've got the message, and this is my journey, right? And so what he wasn't trying to do was put that suddenly on everyone else and go, oh yeah, you'd be way better, way happier not being married and all that kind of thing. I know that I am better with my wife's line of sight. The Father granted that back in. I'm not as wise as Paul, so maybe like these. So these are these things, right? So we don't want to just write something off and not either way. And Paul is actually trying to reflect that, if we're honest with what he's saying in the Word. He's not discouraging the shadow picture at all. In fact, he's actually encouraging it. But from his position, he didn't have a lot of time left. And so, there's just very different circumstances at play. So these are important things to remember. So you don't know, Shane, what the Father has or not has. All I do know is the more you mature in Messiah, you'll just go about it wiser one way or the other. Guarantee it. Okay?
Thank you. I can relate to Paul's journey.
Yeah.
with what you just shared. So
yeah,
I'm not getting any younger.
Thank you, brother. Shabbat shalom to you, mate.
Shabbat shalom to you, folks.
Right, let's go with Haile.
Hey, Shabbat shalom, brothers.
Shabbat shalom.
I'm having some internet issues,
the highlight?
So you don't get to see my Ugg mug, just the pic there. So today,
that's all right. You're still looking handsome. You're okay.
All right, thank you. I'll take that. But no, just following Brother Shane, since we're card carrying members of the Singles Club. But this was a very, very powerful message. I mean, and Curtis, just kind of what I've been going through recently. And it was just very encouraging, Michael, as far as the choices that you have to make, making sure that you're not unequally yoked. You won't let the flesh get in the way. And but it is a hard journey. It is a hard journey. I'm not quite where Shane is, where he says he's fully content. At least I think that's what Shane said. I do desire a wife, but it has to be, Yah has to provide it, because if I've left to my own devices, then it's going to blow up in my face. But your message was really hit home. And I also see parallels, and you've made parallels to moving to Canada. I've got some major career decisions in my life right now, and it's, which route do I go, left, center, or right? And just trying to give that up to Yah. It's kind of hard, but one thing I'll say, and this is a plug for discipleship, just the brotherhood, just the multitude of counsel that you can, reach out for. You may not agree with, everything that you hear, but that you have that counsel and that you can kind of, let it ruminate in your mind, and then also present it to Yah. Kind of like, what was it, King Hezekiah rolling out the scroll in front of Yah, this is it, Father, help me make a decision. But this is a definite testing time in my life, with just coming off the government shutdown, and then career choices, and then, personal choices, walking away from a decision where you can't what is it, the term, convince, control, or convict, a lady interest, and letting them see, your faith and giving that testimony. But then ultimately, if they're not in the camp, they have to count the cost. But you have to let them be on their journey, and it just might not be, Yah's timing. And who knows, you might have planted a seed in the Yah can, water it later, if that is his decision through the Ruach. And I'm kind of thinking of that, and I've discussed this with some brothers too. That could have just been like a talent in your life to use, instead of ignoring it and burying it, that you're witnessing and, doing your best to shine your light, if I'm saying that correctly. But anyway, I guess, I don't know if I really have a question, just more of a, commentary and just the thanks. It was a really, really, really powerful teaching that just hit me. And it's, just because of what I'm going through in my life, but at this time. But anyway.
Haile, let me give you a word of encouragement, because you said in the very short snippet that you realized you're not there to control, convince, or convert this lady interest. And by the sounds of it, it means, okay, that thing is done. Hats off.
It is done.
This is where I want to encourage you, because it sounds like you've gone, I'm going to put Elohim first. One of the greatest bits of wisdom that is lacking in the whole body of Messiah is actually how to choose a spouse. And, like I gave in my witness at the time, the way I verbalized it, it has to be the true faith. It has to be her own. There has to be an understanding of design. What I didn't realize until I was reflecting and talking to the brother was that actually what I was really asking for is a God-fearing woman. And it's because I knew that this choice of spouse you make will either bless you or haunt you for the rest of your life, And so I would rather go without and deal with the struggles that comes with that as a man, than deal with a lifetime of pain and sorrow. Like Curtis said, you can learn the wisdom that the stove is hot, but you can do it by not touching it. You can also do it by touching it, and when it comes to marriage, wow. And, let's take it one step further. Just because someone says, oh, I believe that the Torah is still valid, that doesn't mean they fear Yah. Right. Curtis and I, we've had to deal with people where they've gotten married because they're like, oh, well, we both believe in the Torah, everything's going to be great. But because the fear of Elohim has been lacking, you give it a bit of time and then the cracks start to show, and then you get issues on that front. And it's like, and this is why in my voicing to the Father, the way I worded it, that her faith has to be real and it has to be hers. Because and I'll say it again, I said it in the teaching, if both spouses are in repentance and fear Elohim, everything else will take care of itself. Yes, there'll be struggles. Yes, life will throw its curveballs, but Ruth and I, because we're learning to put Elohim first, we can go through those struggles and these trials as a unit, as one, as a chad. I say to people that are planning to get married, this is why the importance of betrothal is so important. People don't understand the process of betrothal properly, in that, everything's already been laid out before the marriage, because I say to people, you want no surprises on the wedding day or post it, because life's going to throw its own surprises. And if you're not equally yoked, it just comes and bites you back. And so it's I guess what I'm trying to say, Haile, is that the wisdom you've used in this decision, in this short little snippet, I wish that wisdom was being used throughout the body because it would save a lot of heartache, I think. And yeah,
Well, you know what also helps, and a dear brother in DS7 shared this a couple of years ago with me. Serve into your brothers. You know, take the focus off of self and just serve into your brothers, and that could, so you don't fall into self pity or whatnot, and all my friends are getting married and I'm not getting. Just serve into your brothers. Take the focus off of self, and that definitely makes the journey easier. But
Mm.
the warning about being unequally yoked, especially if you're single, definitely, take it seriously and, seek counsel, pray, seek more counsel, because like you
And
said, it could be a lifetime of
and
hurt.
and I want to just kind of close my spiel on this. Some people inherit an unequally yoked situation. That's okay. That can actually be worked with. Like, what I don't want people to think, oh, I'm unequally yoked, that's the end of the world and the end of it's not. Like, people inherit this by virtue, usually one of the spouses may come to faith, the other one doesn't. And so you inherit this unequally yoked. There's still hope. There's plenty of hope. In fact, we've got, the writings of the apostles that would teach us how to actually navigate this. There's discipleship. I guess what I'm saying is if you're single and now you're in the faith, probably wise to save you some heartache. But if you've inherited it, it's far from the end of the line. There's much hope. And we've got testimonies in this community of, the power of a woman, honoring 1 Peter 3, wives, by your good behavior, win them over. And so, things are not so black and white. That's something I've had to learn. And as my wife said,
Right.
when I first came in, I was very black and white, and I've learned to apply wisdom now a bit more.
No, I feel you on that. I definitely feel you on that. But no, again, compliments on the teaching. It's really inspiring, and it was very timely. Very timely. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Hilo.
Shabbat shalom, brother.
Donkey, what's the final word?
The final word. Well,
It's not a word,
Elohim's
actually.
gone
It's
through
a full stop, but sorry.
the full stop. In this story of redemption, we have an Elohim that is taking us in the big spiritual picture, if you will, and he likens it to a marriage and how this is, because there's a level of intimacy that's going to be required in the next stages of his desire. Yet, the place he tells us to start from, and the place that gives us the wisdom in all of this, is the fear of Elohim and to repent. And so it's not a knowledge test. It's not all the things we like to hide behind. I see so many people hide behind the Torah or the Brit Hadashah or behind their gatherings or their whatever it is that they're hiding behind. And that's probably the most sad place, because Rome is kind of like, if somebody's hiding behind matters of Rome, you can kind of get in there and deal with it easily. But when someone's using Elohim to hide behind, to not deal with matters, this can be very tricky, because people see things and go, wow, and we've seen people who've been burnt in the Christian walk and Messianic Hebrew roots walk, Judeo walk, whatever it is. Well, and really the difference wasn't someone's knowledge in the end. The difference was their character and whether it actually did fear Elohim or not. And we have an Elohim that's doing that for all of us in the big spiritual picture. The requirement is that we would repent, and that the beginning of that wisdom from that repentance would be the fear of Elohim. Well, if we're in this big bridal spiritual picture, then why wouldn't we be applying those same principles to our own lives? And so there's two things. If you're in an unequally yoked situation, your good witness and being strong and courageous and loving in a good witness can have a measurable impact on your spouse. Not smashing them over the head with the Torah and, with whatever it is, your religious journeys and all this kind of stuff. But actually let them live with Messiah. Because if they get to live with Messiah, they'll love Messiah. Messiah in you. It's a powerful thing for those who have found themselves unequal, and for those that are single, whether it's the hard way or have never been married. Look for the fear of Elohim in their character. I would not get married and did not get married to my bride until I saw it. It wasn't even an option. And so the betrothal process, as Michael mentioned earlier, is a big deal. It's a big deal to Elohim. We're in this huge betrothal process with him. And it involves repentance and the fear of Elohim. I'd suggest we take those principles into our own lives. So to those who have never been married, treat betrothal seriously and see whether you actually do see the actual fear of Elohim, not the circumstances of their lives. Know this. Do not go to the altar with something that does not fear Elohim. Because if they don't fear Elohim, you're going to encounter things in your lives that it's going to require it, or else it'll have a measurable, long-lasting impact on your life. And so this shadow picture of the testimony today with Michael and Ruth and some of the things we're discussing today in the whole marriage concept, apply it to the weightiest of matters. He's wanting to know it. He's wanting to see it in us. And so these are important matters to work through, and get the input in your life. See this in someone's character, not just religion and knowledge, not I believe, That's often misrepresented too in scripture, that they believed in what? Oh, that they just believed in God. No, the adversary believes in an Elohim. What do you believe in? What does your faith really mean? And these are the principles that actually matter. So for the young ladies out there, you make sure that man has the fear of Elohim, not the fear of you. If you have a man that fears you and not Elohim, you're in trouble. And men, if you're looking at a bride who fears her own emotions before Elohim, you're in for a world of trouble. This is not a joke. You both are aligned with the fear of Elohim, then you're going to talk to each other, you're going to walk with each other, and you're going to build on that together. And then the challenges that face you in life, you will walk through together with an echad line of sight. You will value and cherish one another because your fear is in the right place. It's not in each other, and it's not in your emotions, and it's not in your circumstances. Now you can overcome the giants. You can slay them. Because the giants are coming in this life no matter what way we view it, what angle we're trying to see it from. The giants are coming. And every single one of them can be slayed.
Powerful. Amen to that, brother. And if you're wondering, well, how do I find out if someone fears Yah or not? We'll delve into that next week when we look at the fear of Elohim in brotherhood. But again, as we open up today, what decisions will they make and how will they go about it? But more on that next week as we look at the fear of Elohim in brotherhood. that being said, let's do the Hebrew blessing. Yah will bless you and he will guard you. Yah will shine his countenance upon you and he will be gracious to you. Yah will turn his countenance towards you and grant you shalom. I can almost safely say that he will do all those things if we have fear and reverence of him. Everyone, a big, big Shabbat Shalom to all of you. Enjoy the rest of your Shabbat and the rest of the week, and we'll see you next week.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.